My name is Bonnie Penaflor, and I am 36 years old. I had been married for 8 years, had 2 children, one 6, one 4, and a life that from the outside looked painfully ordinary in the safest way possible. We owned a decent house in the suburbs, both our names on the mortgage. I worked full-time as a civil engineer, long hours, stable income. My husband, John Penaflor, worked in marketing. He'd always had charm. People gravitated toward him easily. I used to think that was one of his best qualities. For months, though, something had felt off. Nothing obvious, nothing I could point to and say this is the problem. Just small things. The way John angled his phone away from me when he texted. How his work lunches started happening more often, always vague, always rushed. How he'd come home energized in ways that had nothing to do with me. I told myself I was imagining it. 8 years together should earn trust, not suspicion. Last Saturday night, John went out for drinks. He called it a casual work thing. Wine coworkers, nothing major. He came home around 11, tipsy but functional, laughing too loudly, overly affectionate. He kept telling me how much he loved me, how lucky he was. I helped him get ready for bed. He passed out almost instantly. Sunday morning, I was making coffee when he shuffled into the kitchen, pale, squinting at the light. Ugh, he groaned, dropping into a chair. Did I really say that last night? I didn't turn around. Say what? I don't remember half of what I said, he muttered, rubbing his temples. I didn't say anything stupid, did I? Here's the thing. He hadn't said anything. Just the usual drunken rambling about coworkers' complaints, nothing memorable. But the way he asked there was something underneath it. Fear. Not embarrassment. Fear. So I took a gamble. Still facing the counter, still pouring coffee, I kept my voice neutral. You don't remember telling me about Laura. Silence. I turned around slowly. John's face had gone completely white. Not flushed, not sheepish, white. What did I say exactly, he asked. I shrugged. You tell me. You brought her up. I was drunk, he said quickly. I didn't even know what I was talking about. It's nothing. Then why do you look like you're about to pass out? His eyes filled. Not dramatic sobbing, just quiet tears sliding down his face. It's not what you think. What do I think? We're just friends, he said. She's my ex, but we work together. Sometimes we grab lunch. That's it. I sat down across from him. Calm. Still holding my coffee. Keep going. And guilty people always do. Over the next hour, I barely spoke. John did all the work himself. It went from just friends to texting sometimes. From nothing inappropriate to some flirting. From we kissed once to it happened a few times. By the end, he admitted to a 4-month emotional affair that turned physical. 6 weeks earlier. Multiple times. Her apartment. Lunch breaks. His friends knew. Covered for him. When he finally stopped talking, he looked at me with desperate hope. But you already knew, right, he said. I told you last night, so we can work through this. I set my cup down. You didn't tell me anything last night, I said quietly. I guessed. The moment he realized what he'd done, I watched something inside him collapse. You tricked me, he whispered. No, I replied. I asked one question. You answered it for an hour. He started screaming, calling me manipulative, cruel, a monster. The irony was lost on him. I grabbed my keys and left. That was 6 days ago, and nothing has been the same since. I drove to my sister Margaret Penaflor's house without really thinking about the route. Muscle memory took over while my mind stayed stuck in the kitchen, replaying John's face, when he realized he'd confessed to everything without being directly accused. That moment haunted me, not because I felt guilty, but because I saw how quickly he shifted from panic to anger, from shame to blame. Margaret didn't ask many questions when I showed up with an overnight bag and hollow eyes. She hugged me, once firm and grounding, then made tea and let me talk when I was ready. I told her everything slowly, clinically, as if recounting a case study instead of the collapse of my marriage. She listened without interrupting, her jaw tightening with every detail. You didn't trick him, she said when I finished. You gave him space to lie or tell the truth. He chose the truth. I stayed in her guest room that night. I didn't sleep. By morning, my phone was vibrating nonstop. John's name filled the screen over and over again. When I didn't answer, the messages started coming, long, rambling texts, swinging wildly between remorse and accusation. I made a mistake. You set me up. I was drunk. You're cold. You didn't even fight for us. By noon, his mother entered the conversation. She called me directly. How could you do this to him? She demanded, not even bothering with a greeting. He's devastated. You humiliated him. I didn't humiliate him, I said evenly. He cheated. Men make mistakes, she snapped. They don't always handle emotional needs well. John was lonely. You work all the time. I felt something harden in my chest. I work to support my family. He chose to have an affair instead of talking to me. Well, she said sharply, marriage takes forgiveness. So does accountability. She hung up on me. John's friends started texting next. Subtle at first. Everyone messes up. Don't throw away 8 years. You're overreacting. One of them even suggested I should be grateful he'd confessed instead of hiding it better. That was when I understood something important. None of them were angry about the affair. They were angry that it had consequences. 3 days later, I agreed to meet John at the house to discuss logistics, clothes, schedules, the kids. I told Margaret where I was going, just in case. When I walked into the living room, John was already there. So was his mother. An ambush, Bonnie John said quickly, standing up. Please, let's talk like adults. His mother didn't wait. You need to stop this nonsense and work on your marriage. With respect, I said, keeping my voice level, this isn't your business. It is my business when you're tearing apart my grandchildren's family. John stepped closer. Baby, please. It was one mistake. It was dozens of decisions, I said. Every text, every lie. Every time you went to her apartment and then came home and kissed our kids. Our marriage wasn't perfect, he shot back. You were distant. So you slept with your ex-girlfriend instead of asking for counseling. At the word counseling, his eyes lit up like he'd been thrown a rope. Yes, he said quickly. We can do counseling. I'll do anything. I don't want counseling, I replied. I want a divorce. His mother stood up abruptly. You're being cruel, vindictive. This isn't the Christian thing to do. Neither is adultery, I said quietly. I gathered my things and headed for the door. That's when John said it, the sentence that stripped away any remaining doubt. If you divorce me, he said coldly, I'll make sure you never see those kids. I turned around slowly. Did you just threaten me? His expression shifted instantly. That's not what I meant. I'm just saying, courts favor fathers less. And if you're going to be difficult, I'm recording this conversation, I said calmly. Have been since I walked in. Keep talking. I wasn't recording, but the fear on his face was real enough to satisfy me. His mother sputtered. That's illegal. We're in a one-party consent state, I said. Look it up. I left without another word. That night, I sat on Margaret's couch and typed out everything timestamps, exact wording, context. I emailed it to myself, backed it up, and started a file. The next morning, I scheduled a consultation with a divorce attorney. I wasn't emotional anymore. I was done being naive. The attorney's office smelled like coffee and lemon cleaner, the kind of neutral, forgettable scent meant to keep emotions from lingering too long. Her name was Rachel Whitman, mid-40s, sharp eyes, calm voice. She didn't waste time with platitudes or false comfort, and I realized within minutes that I needed exactly that kind of honesty. She listened while I laid everything out, the affair, the confession, the threats, his mother's involvement, the children. I handed over the notes I'd already started documenting. She skimmed them once, then looked up at me with quiet approval. You did the right thing starting this early, she said. Most people wait until things explode. I asked her the question that had been gnawing at me since I left the house. Does the affair matter? Emotionally. Absolutely, she replied. Legally. Less than people think. You're in a no-fault state. Asset division will likely be close to 50-50. Custody is where behavior matters. That stung even though I'd expected it. 8 years of marriage reduced to math and statutes. She explained the likely outcomes. The house would probably need to be sold. Equity split. Retirement accounts divided. Custody starting point would be 50-50, unless one parent could be shown to be acting against the children's best interests. I'm not trying to take the kids away from their father, I said quickly. I just want out, with my dignity, and fair access to my children. Rachel nodded. That mindset will help you. But you also need to understand something. Contested divorces turn ugly fast. People do things they never thought they'd do. I thought of John's threat at the door. I've already seen that, I said. Then document everything, she continued. Every interaction, every message, every comment the kids repeat. Assume everything you say could end up in front of a judge. When I left her office, my hands were shaking not from fear, but from clarity. There was no going back now, no pretending this was a misunderstanding that could be smoothed over with apologies and counseling sessions. This was a process, a long one, and I needed to be smarter than emotional. I went back to the house 2 days later to pick up more clothes and discuss schedules. I told John I'd come alone and expected the same courtesy. He agreed. He lied. His mother was there again, sitting stiffly on the couch like she owned the place. The conversation started civil enough, if tense. Drop-off times, school schedules, who would keep which car. Then it slid inevitably into blame. "You're acting like I'm a monster," John said, voice tight. "I told you the truth." "You told me because you thought I already knew," I said. "There's a difference." "I was lonely," he snapped. "You were always working." "And I was faithful," I replied. "That was my choice." His mother leaned forward. "You're punishing him instead of fixing your marriage." "I'm accepting reality," I said. "He didn't make one mistake. He made dozens. And he only stopped because he got caught." John's expression hardened. "So that's it? You're just done?" "Yes. You're throwing away at our family." "No," I said quietly. "He did that. I'm just not pretending otherwise." That was when he tried again, softer this time. Counseling, church, time apart without divorce. Anything that didn't involve consequences. I didn't argue. I didn't negotiate. I stood up, gathered my things, and left. That night I added another entry to my file. The next morning Rachel called. "We should file," she said, "before he does something reckless." I agreed. The papers were prepared within days. When John was served the following Monday, the calls started immediately. 17 missed calls in 2 hours. Voicemails bouncing between sobbing apologies and furious accusations. His mother called next, then his sister, then his father, who surprised me by sounding genuinely remorseful, apologizing for his son's behavior and saying he understood why I was doing this. Apparently, that conversation triggered a massive family fight, but John's response told me everything I needed to know. He didn't think this was real. He thought I would break. He thought I would come back. He was wrong. 3 days after the divorce papers were served, my phone rang at work. It was Human Resources. The woman on the line sounded careful, professional, the way people do when they're about to say something that could derail your life. She explained that an anonymous complaint had been submitted, alleging that I was having an inappropriate relationship with a coworker and that it was creating a hostile work environment. For a moment, I honestly couldn't process the words. Then the pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The complaint was detailed enough that HR had no choice but to investigate. Dates, locations, implications. They wouldn't tell me specifics policy, but they said I'd be placed under review while they conducted interviews. I sat through 4 days of quiet scrutiny. They interviewed me. They interviewed the female coworker I was supposedly involved with. She was mortified, confused, furious. We'd barely spoken beyond project updates and emails. They reviewed calendars, email logs, building access records. There was nothing, because there had been nothing. When HR officially cleared me, they apologized for the stress and confirmed that a formal report would be filed stating that the allegations were unfounded. I asked if they could tell me who had submitted the complaint. They couldn't, anonymous system. But everyone knew. Rachel documented it immediately. "False allegations during a custody dispute are not a good look," she said calmly, "especially when they mirror the accusing party's own behavior." That was the moment I realized John wasn't just angry. He was retaliating. The next blow landed closer to home. During one of my evenings with the kids, my 6-year-old climbed into my lap, eyes wet, voice trembling. "Mommy," he asked, "why don't you want to be my mom anymore?" My chest cracked open. I held him tightly and told him the truth, in the only way a child could handle it, that I would always be his mother, that I loved him more than anything, that sometimes parents lived in different houses, but love didn't change. Later that night, I wrote down exactly what he'd said. The date, the time, the context. Rachel had warned me about this subtle parental alienation. Not outright lies, but carefully phrased sadness, meant to make the kids feel abandoned by me instead of confused by the situation. And then came the police. 2 officers showed up at Margaret's house one evening, polite but serious. John had reported that I'd stolen his laptop jewelry and $2,000 in cash when I moved out. I handed them the photos I'd taken the day I left, clear images of the items I'd packed, timestamps included. I explained the divorce, the ongoing dispute. They took notes, asked a few questions, and left. One of them paused at the door and said quietly, "Seen this before. Get a good lawyer." I already had one. The officer's report noted there was no evidence of theft and that I had documentation of my belongings. Another entry in the file. What John didn't realize was that every move he made was building a pattern. False accusations, weaponizing the kids, abusive systems meant to protect people. And then the final piece fell into place. Margaret's husband worked in the same office complex as John, different department, same building. 2 weeks after the police incident, he sent me a photo taken in the parking garage. John and Laura kissing next to his car. The timestamp showed it was taken 2 days after the divorce filing. I forwarded it to Rachel. She didn't smile often, but this time she did. This helps, she said, not with assets, but with custody. John was still seeing his ex-girlfriend, still lying, still trying to paint me as unstable while actively proving the opposite. Our first custody hearing was scheduled for the following week. I wasn't trying to destroy him. I was trying to protect my children from being used as weapons in a war he started. And this time I was ready. The courthouse was colder than I expected, not just in temperature, but in atmosphere. Everything echoed footsteps, voices, the scrape of chairs, as if the building itself was designed to strip emotion down to its barest form. I sat beside Rachel at the long table, hands folded, spine straight, reminding myself to breathe. John sat across from me with his attorney, his posture rigid, jaw clenched. He didn't look at me once. His mother sat behind him in the gallery, already shaking her head like the verdict had been decided unfairly before anyone spoke. John's attorney went first. She painted a familiar picture, one I recognized instantly as carefully curated. I was emotionally distant, career-focused to the point of neglect, a mother who prioritized work over connection, a wife who had psychologically manipulated her husband into confessing to something he was ashamed of. According to her, my entrapment proved. I was cold, calculating, and vindictive, and therefore unfit for significant custody. I listened without reacting. Rachel stood next. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't dramatize. She laid out facts. 12 documented incidents of subtle parental alienation over 5 weeks each, with dates and context. The false HR complaint and the company's written report clearing me of wrongdoing. The false police report and the officer's notes confirming no theft. Screenshots of John's messages threatening to keep the children from me. And finally, the photograph. The judge studied it in silence. "Mr. Penaflor," she said at last, looking directly at John, "are you still in contact with this individual?" His attorney stood. "Objection." "Overruled," the judge said calmly. "Answer the question." John swallowed. "I've seen her a few times. Just to talk. Work-related." The judge slid the photograph forward. "This image shows you kissing her in a parking garage 2 days after your divorce filing." "That was taken out of context," John said weakly. The judge's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes hardened. She'd seen this before. Too many times. The ruling came faster than I'd expected. Primary physical custody would be awarded to me. The children would live with me during the school week. John would have them every other weekend and Wednesday evenings. Any further attempts at alienation would result in a custody review. John's face collapsed. His mother stood up in the gallery, shouting about bias and injustice until court security escorted her out. I didn't feel victorious. I felt exhausted. Asset division followed the standard path house to be sold. Equity split. Retirement accounts divided. I was ordered to pay modest child support to John for the time the children were with him, a figure far lower than he'd demanded. "That barely covers groceries," John snapped. The judge looked at him coolly. "You work. You have earning capacity. This support is meant for the children's needs, not your lifestyle." Outside the courtroom, his mother cornered me in the parking lot. "You ruined his life," she hissed. "He ruined his own life," I replied evenly. "I just stopped covering for it." "You manipulated him." I gave him a chance to tell the truth. "You'll regret this." I got into my car without another word. That night, I tucked my children into beds that weren't in the house they'd grown up in, but were safe, quiet, mine. For the first time in months, I slept. The divorce wasn't final yet. There was still a mandatory waiting period, but all the major decisions had been made. On paper, everything looked clean and orderly. In reality, my life felt like it had been shaken out and put back together by someone who didn't know where all the pieces belonged. I moved into a 3-bedroom apartment 10 minutes from the kids' school. It was smaller than the house we'd sold, but it was quiet in a way I hadn't realized I needed. No tension humming in the walls, no waiting for the other shoe to drop. The kids adjusted unevenly, which I expected. My 6-year-old acted out at school for a few weeks, short-temper trouble focusing. My 4-year-old asked almost every night when Daddy was coming to live with us again. I answered honestly but gently every time, even when it felt like my heart was being scraped raw. "Daddy has his own home now," I'd say, "but he loves you, and I love you. That doesn't change." John and I communicated strictly through a co-parenting app, exactly as the custody order required. No texts, No calls unless it was an emergency. He tested that boundary constantly, long, emotional messages about how I was poisoning the kids against him, how inflexible I was being, how he couldn't believe I'd done this to us. I responded to none of it. I replied only to logistics, drop-off times, permission slips, doctor's appointments. Rachel told me that silence used correctly was powerful, not as punishment, but as protection. John didn't see it that way. He told mutual friends I was cold, calculated, that I'd planned this all along, that I'd wanted him to fail. Some believed him. Some quietly stopped returning his calls. I didn't correct anyone. I didn't defend myself. I didn't need to. A month after the custody hearing, John made things official with Laura. Public posts, smiling photos, a caption about finding happiness after hardship. The audacity almost made me laugh. Almost. Margaret showed me the post once, carefully watching my face. I felt nothing. Not anger, not jealousy, just confirmation. He hadn't been confused. He hadn't been lost. He'd been choosing. The financial reality hit slowly. Half my retirement savings gone. Attorney fees that wiped out what little cushion I'd had. Child support payments going out every month, even though the kids lived with me most of the time. It hurt, but I'd stopped equating money with loss. The divorce would be finalized in a few weeks. The paperwork was already drafted, waiting on time more than decisions. Some nights after the kids were asleep, I sat on the balcony of my apartment and let the exhaustion catch up with me. Divorce wasn't just emotional, it was logistical, financial, relentless. There was always another form, another adjustment, another reminder of what had been dismantled. But there was also peace. No more lying awake next to someone I didn't trust. No more questioning my own instincts. No more shrinking myself to keep the illusion of harmony intact. I wasn't free in the triumphant cinematic sense. I was free in the quiet, survivable one. And that was enough. The divorce became final on a Tuesday morning I almost forgot about. No courtroom. No dramatic confrontation. Just a digital notification from my attorney confirming what had already been emotionally settled for weeks. 8 years reduced to a stamped document and a series of obligations that would stretch on for years in smaller, quieter ways. I stared at my phone for a long time after reading the message, waiting for some overwhelming emotion to hit. It didn't. What I felt instead was fatigue. Bone-deep, honest exhaustion. Life settled into a new rhythm after that. School mornings, packed lunches, homework at the kitchen table, weekends that alternated between chaos and stillness, depending on whose turn it was. The kids slowly stopped asking when their father was coming back to live with us. They started asking instead what was for dinner, whether they could have friends over, if we could go to the park. Normal questions. John and I remained bound by the co-parenting app. He continued to test boundaries, slipping an emotional commentary where logistics were required. "You're turning them against me. You always wanted control. I can't believe you did this to our family." I never responded. Silence wasn't cruelty, it was consistency. Laura appeared occasionally at drop-offs after that lingering too long, smiling too brightly, as if daring me to react. I didn't. She wasn't the villain of my story. She was just a chapter that revealed who John already was. Friends filtered themselves naturally. Some drifted away, uncomfortable with choosing sides. Others stayed quietly, bringing groceries, offering childcare, sitting with me when the nights felt too long. I learned who valued me without conditions. One evening, my 6-year-old asked a question that stopped me cold. "Mom," he said carefully, "did Daddy lie to you?" I didn't answer immediately. I chose my words with the same care I'd used in court, with doctors, with lawyers. "Yes," I said finally, "he did." "Is that why you don't live together?" "Yes." He thought about it for a moment, then nodded. "I don't like lying." "Neither do I thought. That night after they were asleep, I reflected on everything I'd learned, not in the abstract, inspirational way people talk about growth, but in the practical, bruised sense that comes from surviving something you didn't choose. Trusting your instincts isn't paranoia. Documenting reality isn't manipulation. Asking questions isn't cruelty. I hadn't destroyed my marriage. I'd uncovered the truth about it. The affair, the lies, the threats, the false accusations, the attempts to turn my children into leverage. None of that happened because I asked a question over coffee. It happened because John believed I would never ask. I lost half my savings. I lost a house. I lost the future I thought I was building. But I gained clarity. I gained peace. And most importantly, my children still had 2 parents who loved them. One who made mistakes, and one who refused to pretend those mistakes didn't matter. That was the quiet truth. And it was enough.